Hi, welcome back to my channel. In this True Crimes Behind the Plots of American Horror Story, I'm going to focus on the case of Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia. The one thing that I wanted to make sure in doing this case was to try to bring in as much as possible about Elizabeth's life prior to her horrific murder. There are so many movies and documentaries and videos done on this case. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot known about her prior to her murder, but I wanted to make sure that I brought in as much as I could. Elizabeth did not have the best upbringing. She was the third of 5 children. In 1929, she was 6. Her father disappeared. His car was found abandoned on a bridge. It was assumed that he had committed suicide. Suicides during and after the Great Depression were not uncommon. So when his car was found on a bridge and he was nowhere to be found, it was just assumed that he had jumped off the bridge. In 1942, her father actually resurfaced. Elizabeth was 18 and he was found living in California, and that he basically just had abandoned his life. He couldn't take having to take care of a wife and 5 daughters, and so he had faked a suicide. For a lot of people, especially Elizabeth's mother, this was a huge issue and problem, obviously, because she not only struggled as a single parent, but she struggled as a single parent of 5 children during the Great Depression, thinking that her husband had committed suicide, and here he was living in California, and it just did not sit well with her. Unfortunately, though, Elizabeth really wanted to reconnect with him. She had asked him for money after they reconnected, and it's not known what she told him the money was for, but she used that money to travel to California to see him. Unfortunately, he wasn't as happy about the reunion as she maybe had anticipated that he would be. She did end up staying with him, but it's reported that because of her lifestyle and the fact that she wanted to party and she was in California for the first time, she wanted to go out and experience life, and he was just really not into that. So she ended up moving out from her dad's house or apartment or wherever he was living at the time. Again, there's not a lot of history on Elizabeth. There's not even a lot of information in terms of what her personality was like, or any of her likes or dislikes or anything like that. It can be seen though by her pattern of behavior that she was really affected by the loss of her father in her life in general when she thought he had passed away. Then even though she might have been happy about finding him, the reality that he had abandoned her and her family had to have weighed on her at some point. So she was known to get involved with men, and to get involved with men who were known to be abusive. That would not be uncommon for a young girl, whether it's in the 20s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it doesn't matter when it was, Great Depression or otherwise. When little girls are abandoned by their fathers, they tend to seek out men maybe more aggressively than others, and they tend to maybe seek out men that are really controlling or domineering, and that's not unusual to have happen. Soon after leaving her father's house, she did begin to date an Air Force sergeant who had been reportedly abusive towards her. She was arrested for underage drinking in 1943. Because of this, she was fingerprinted and she has a mugshot. The mugshot is a widely known image of her. Honestly, I feel like in her mugshot, the depth and it's something about her eyes in that photograph. If I can include it, I will. She's just so striking and stunning, and there's some kind of depth. I can't put my finger on it, but when I look at it, it's like I just drowned in the stare that she has. And I'd be interested to see what you guys think of that photograph specifically. And ironically, because she was arrested for underage drinking, now again, she was 18 or 19 at the time, but that was still not a legal drinking age. Because she was arrested for that and fingerprinted, that's the reason that she was even identified. Had that not happened, we may not even know who the Black Dahlia was. After she was arrested, she was supposed to go back to Massachusetts. That's where her family, where her mom was, that's where she was from. But for some reason, she didn't go back to Massachusetts. She actually went to Florida to stay with family friends. Now, Elizabeth had an issue with asthma. She would have severe asthma attacks. She would have ongoing bouts of bronchitis. And because of that, her doctor suggested that she spend more of the colder winter months in Florida. And so this wasn't like just a random family friend that she went to. She had spent at least a part of every single year in Florida since she was a child. So she ended up in Florida. Whether it was a time of year situation, maybe it was a time of year where her asthma would flare up if she would have went to Massachusetts, or if it was just one of those things like, I've gone to California, I've gotten arrested, like right now I just like don't even want to deal with my mom. And being someone who, you know, my parents were never married and my dad was not a huge part of my life, I can imagine like if I decided like, oh hey, I'm gonna go live with my dad after he's not been around most of my whole life, you know, her mom may not have been like super enthused about that. And so maybe after she went out there and her mom said like, this isn't cool, and then she like gets in all this trouble and she's doing all this stuff, like the last thing she might have wanted to do was like face her mom again. So maybe just going to the family friends in Florida was just easier for her at the time. While she was in Florida, she met Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr. He was in the Air Force. She met him at a New Year's Eve party in 1943, and reportedly they fell in love. Although he was going to be deployed, she claimed that he had proposed to her prior to him leaving. On the way home from combat, he was in a plane crash and he was killed. His family to this day denies that they were engaged and denies that they had a significant relationship of any kind. That could be for a couple reasons. You know, obviously after her murder, you know, the media really took this and ran with it. And they made her seem like she was just a party girl or a girl that went with any type of guy, hanging out here, hanging out there, you know, and their son had died in the line of combat, you know, and this was just a media frenzy. So, you know, I can imagine that they wouldn't want his death to be overshadowed by her murder and everything that was going on in the media regarding that. I just think it's sad that if they were really in love and if he did really propose to her, that neither one of them would live long enough to even see that happen. But then also, you know, with such a horrific death, she doesn't even get the acknowledgement that maybe some of these things were so not true and that she was, you know, just a beautiful, wanted, loved person, and there was someone that loved her. And I can imagine too, like, that his death may have like set the stage for some of these events, because it could have sent her into sort of a tizzy about the different things happening in her life. Like, things did not seem to be going good, and potentially if they were engaged, if they fell in love, like, you know, even if it's sort of like that love at first sight sort of thing, sometimes that can just make all this crap that's going on in your life seem so much easier, so much better, you know, feeling just like so positive and happy. And losing that, especially in such a way where you have no closure and then the family's denying you, you know, it could really put you in a difficult headspace. Elizabeth returned to LA, and while she was in LA, she worked as a waitress. It's commonly reported that Elizabeth was an aspiring actress, but there's no proof that she actually was pursuing acting. Now, LA would be the place that you would go. I mean, even, you know, even today, people go there wanting to pursue acting or a career in entertainment, singing, what have you. And, you know, they work regular jobs. A lot of times they work waitressing or bartending jobs, because that does leave you open for auditions and different opportunities during the day, and then you work at night. So that would have been unusual. It's just there's nothing really showing that she was actively pursuing that. Maybe it was just like a dream. Like, people were like, oh, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer. I want to be, you know, an actress, an actor. But they have yet to sort of take the steps and the behaviors to actually make that happen. Elizabeth's body was found January 15th in 1947 in Lambert Park, by a local resident. I believe they were walking their child like in a stroller. The person that found her body initially thought that it was a mannequin, especially because of the way that the body had been laid out. I'm really going to keep the details of her body and her murder and that part of it to a minimum. Like, if you want to find, you can find pictures of it, you can find all that. I'm not going to include all of that, but just for the sake of understanding the context, her body was separated into two parts, which again, from a lot, like a farther away distance, would make it seem more like a mannequin, because mannequins can come like apart from the waist. That's initially what that person thought. Some of these strange elements of her body condition was not only that it had been cut in half, but that it had been drained of all of its blood. So it wasn't that she was murdered there. She obviously was murdered somewhere else and then relocated where she had been found. Her legs were situated in a sexually suggestive manner. I don't know if they've ever determined whether or not she had been raped at all during this situation, but I think it's important to note the way that her legs have been positioned, because I think it says a lot about the killer. I don't believe that the person that murdered her was just, some random serial killer, someone staying at the Cecil Hotel that just decided to murder her. This was very specific. It was deliberate. It was elaborate. There was meaning for the killer behind not only the manner by which she was killed, but the manner by which they positioned her body to be found, where the body was found. I do believe that there was significance in every single element. The other part of her body that is of note was that her face had been cut, like from ear to ear, like the mouth part was cut here. They call that the everlasting smile. It just gave her face a very eerie look to it, especially for someone who has passed away, to sort of have this weird, it reminds me of like Joker character, especially like when Heath Ledger played the Joker, and just that those cuts and that smile was just haunting. To mutilate her face like that, again, I do believe holds significant meaning. She did have ligature marks on her wrists, which indicated that she had been restrained prior to her death. She had a lot of superficial cuts, cuts that wouldn't have killed her or maybe even hurt her that much. So again, I just think that means something. That meant something to the person that hurt her. Whether they were hesitation, whether it was torture, whether it was their own curiosity about the human body, I don't know, but they weren't there for no reason. So the other part of this case that's really interesting is there's a time period where her whereabouts cannot be accounted for. So there's a couple ways to look at this. Maybe she was murdered the day that she was gone missing, and the person kept her body and put it in the park later so that it could be discovered later to sort of separate themselves from the time frame. Or potentially she was alive for some of those days, and all of these different superficial cuts and the ligatures, maybe she was being tortured during that time. From the time she was last seen until her body was found, there are several days that are unaccounted for. So on June 8th, she was partying with a man named Robert Red Manley. He was a 25-year-old salesman who was married. He said that after they were partying, they went back to the hotel. He slept in the bed, and he said that she slept in the chair because she wasn't feeling well, seemingly maybe because she had drank too much. And that he said that on January 8th, he had dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel, and she had said she had plans with her sister, and so he dropped her off there. And that she reportedly made a call while she was there, and she made the call in the lobby, and then she left right after she made the call. And this was the last confirmed sighting of her. So then there may or may not have been other sightings of her over sort of the next 6 days. So there's a 6-day period where they can say, yes, for sure she had been seen, and then when her body was found. And so there are some people who say that they saw her, but they can't confirm that that was actually her that they saw. They believe that on the 9th was when she was either abducted or she was killed. So just to sort of circle back, Elizabeth was 5'5" tall. She was 115 pounds, and she had these amazing blue eyes. I personally found her to be quite stunning. The one thing about her features that stood out is that it said at the time of her death that she had badly decayed teeth. Why that would be an issue, I do know that this was following the Depression. A lot of people didn't necessarily take care of their teeth. There was a lot of issues with like dental care and things like that. So I don't know that that was necessarily unusual, but it was obviously reported on for a reason. So I just thought that was interesting that they said that. I mean, I guess part of it for me is this idea that she was trying to be an actress or what have you. I mean, obviously she would have had to do several different things cosmetically in terms of like, you know, making sure that, you know, you were the right weight and your like, hair is nice and you're wearing, you know, the right clothes and things like that, just like in general. But you would think that if she was pursuing acting, like she would be wanting to address her teeth. Now I know actors, like up until like more recent years, like these recent decades, like, and like even European actors, like teeth being straight were not always important. But I do feel like they couldn't have been like decayed and like missing or what have you. But I'm not really sure. So I don't know what the significance of that is, but I just wanted to share that with you because that was in my research. So it was the media that dubbed her the Black Dahlia, and about a week after her body had been discovered, some of the like newspapers were getting letters, presumably from the killer. So the media had a very different role in terms of and relationship with police departments at this time than it does now. Like, it was not unusual for newspapers to be highly involved in these different crimes and investigations, even more so or before the police were. People could sort of maybe say that the person writing these letters was like, you know, just someone wanting the attention, you know, because the newspapers would write stories about it and like they made it such a big thing. One of the newspapers received personal items of Elizabeth's in the mail. They got her birth certificate, photographs, and business cards that she had. Whoever sent these either was the killer, knew the killer, somehow had access to her personal belongings, so having intimate knowledge. So that's like, it's just kind of creepy and like eerie that someone not only would have that stuff for whatever reason, whether they're a killer or they know the killer, and then be like sending it to the newspaper like, hey, here's her birth certificate. Like, it's just next level in terms of thinking, and not next level in a good way. I really feel like the media in this case like just took things to the next level, and maybe I'll do a whole series of cases where the media played such a huge role that it could have affected the case or the view of the either murderer or view of the victim in the case because of their influence and them being as vocal and opinionated as they were. If you'd like to see a series of videos on that, go ahead and just comment down below. The media made her out to be like this proud woman who was running around wearing tight clothes and essentially like maybe brought some of this on herself just because of her demeanor. They even reported that she, on her last day, was seen wearing a tight shirt and a see-through top, when in actuality it was confirmed that she was wearing a black suit the last day, like a skirt suit, the last day that she was seen. I mean, I just like, let's put this in perspective. This is 1947. Were women becoming, you know, more comfortable in their bodies and wanting to express themselves? Yes. But overall, you just weren't a regular person, a woman walking around in a see-through top. Like, even now, even though it's accepted, and you even have the 1980s with like Madonna and things like that where people wore like bras as shirts. But this is 1947. I just, you know, it's crazy that they could just publish that she's like running around in a see-through shirt, like in LA, and that would have been just like a regular attire for her because that's who she was. Like, that was ridiculous. And to find that she actually wasn't wearing that, she was wearing a black suit, is super annoying. The press also used the words adventurous and proud to describe her demeanor, her personality, and how she was like prowling around LA, you know, in search of men or whatever. Some reports even described her as a sex fiend. Like, they just took it to the next level. This poor woman was murdered in such a disgusting and gruesome manner. And you don't even know, she could have been tortured for all those days. And like, it just is so disgusting that because of that, who cares? Let's for argument's sake, she was a prostitute. Let's say she was a sex fiend. She was hooking up with this sailor, that sailor. Like, so that makes it okay to be freaking dismembered, drained of your blood, potentially tortured, have your face disfigured, and left in a disgusting pose in a park? Like, sometimes I think these media situations, like, really need to get a grip. There was so many other, like, unfounded stories that you can find, that she was pregnant, that she was a lesbian, that she was a prostitute, you know, so it's sort of like, why would people portray her in this way? And then, like, why would people even entertain that type of situation? So I've thought about this long and hard, and I do feel like sometimes when the media gets involved, or when there's these crazy stories about victims, I think it's out of fear. And what I mean by that is, if we go with the idea that she was just, you know, she was like a regular teen, you know, experimenting, like, you know, having drinks, she's in LA, she wants to be an actress, like, that's something that everybody, you know, like, not everybody, but that's something that a lot of people have dreamed. They're gonna, like, go to New York or go to LA, they're gonna be discovered, they're gonna get their big break. You know, they could be from a small town, they could be from Massachusetts like she was, and just, like, travel to LA and, you know, pursue their dreams. The idea that that could end in one of the arguably most gruesome murders in American history is super scary. It makes it so you feel like, you know, maybe it isn't safe to follow your dreams. Maybe it isn't safe to just go out in the world and experience life and just, you know, hope for the best. It was almost a fear, I believe, of this is what happens. I remember there was another case, it was called the Career Girl Murders, and maybe it's a case I'll cover, but it was sort of like, you know, at a time when women were just, like, choosing to, like, follow careers as opposed to, you know, just being, like, stay-at-home moms and getting married and things like that. It was a murder where I believe it was 2 girls had gotten murdered, but I think 3 or 4 of the girls lived together in an apartment, and they were all just young girls, like, out in the workforce, and it was, like, taken to the next level in terms of, this is what happens if you just go off on your own and want a career, like, you end up getting murdered. And that wasn't even why they got murdered. So it just really reminds me of that sort of hysteria and situation, because if it isn't something ridiculous, if it isn't that she got into prostitution and she's running around in a see-through shirt and she's over here prowling men and being promiscuous, then it just means that you could be a regular girl pursuing a regular dream and you could get murdered in a gruesome way. That's really hard for people to wrap their brains around. So I think sometimes they have to make it more ridiculous and horrible in order to justify that sometimes horrible people exist and they do disgusting, horrible things to other people. No matter how much crime happens, it's really hard when it happens to someone, to yourself or someone that you know, to think that it really happens outside of just TV or a news report, that it could really happen. That's scary.